Hi everybody, John back again. This is going to be a short little video where I show the newly released or reissued Wobbler albums. They're pretty impressive, so we'll talk about them a little bit. Before I go on with that, I'll just talk about what I'm listening to at the moment. This is Jan Hammer, First 7 Days. Been one of my favourite records for many years. Picked this up at like a car boot sale in the late 80s when I was a student living in Portsmouth, and I just liked the cover really. Little did I know, that this was going to go on to be a record that I pull out and play fairly regularly. So it's a great album, completely instrumental, and of course Jan Hammer is all over this record. Anyway, so Wobbler, so Wobbler from Norway. I first heard about Wobbler when I kind of got reintroduced to progressive rock. So I mean, when I was a student in Portsmouth, on the south coast of England, I started getting into progressive rock. That was my sort of first exposure to it, and I really enjoyed it for a few years. Got deeper into heavy metal though, and I don't know, progressive rock seemed to sort of take a back seat. But then I kind of rediscovered it again around about 2008, when my first son was born. It just felt inappropriate and wrong to be playing kind of raucous heavy metal music, which is pretty much what I listened to then, with a small baby about, so I changed it up a bit. I got started listening to the Beatles, and around about that time I really picked up on this whole rediscovery of prog, and it was great. Now, I lived in Sweden at the time, and there was some amazing stuff happening in Sweden. Really liked Swedish prog, and there was one band in particular that I was intrigued by. I couldn't get their music. Eventually did, but at the time Afterglow was very hard to sort of get hold of, and I can't remember where or how, but I'd heard, or perhaps even read somewhere, that this Norwegian band called Wobbler had a very similar vibe to Afterglow, and they only had a couple of albums out at the time on CD, and so I invested in the first one of their albums, and it was good. It took me a long time to really get into it. Similar to Afterglow, but not completely the same. And that was this. So what I'm going to show you now is the recent reissue of these albums. I've had them on CD, and Wobbler decided to reissue their albums in a box set, and I thought, well, I could get that box set, but I don't really need it because I've got many of their albums already on vinyl. But this is the first one, Hinterland. Now, I've had this album for, like I say, from around about 2008. Walked many miles with my dog through the Swedish countryside and woodland and stuff, listening to this on my headphones on CD, and it's quite an intense record, difficult to get into, but I persevered with it, and I will say this, although I've always liked it and had respect for it, I've never liked it as much as I do now, because, and this sounds a bit superficial, but on record it sounds so much better. It sounds so much better than what it did on CD. Part of me thinks, well, maybe that's just in my head, but it's not, because just turn this down. On vinyl, at least on my system, it sounds beautiful. You can hear all the instruments beautifully produced, and these records that I'm going to show you now are so quiet. There's little or no surface noise. I mean, you always get some vinyl, don't you, but these records are so quiet, so they really do sound beautiful. Hinterland, there's a big long track on here. I can't remember which one it is, but on the CD it's sort of like, I don't know, 25 minutes long or something like that. They've had to break that up. Yeah, actually the track Hinterland, they've had to break it up to fit it on vinyl. So side 2 on the first vinyl is part 1, Hinterland, goes on for 17 minutes 49 seconds, and then part 2 on side 2, side 2, sorry, is 9 minutes 47 seconds. So on the CD that's all one big long track, but it still works very well. They've sort of split it beautifully. But like I said, it's always been slightly impenetrable for me, this album, until now. There's an insert. Hairy looking Norwegians. And so I'm overjoyed nearly now to get this. And I'm sort of enjoying the album anew, if you like, because I'm very familiar with the music, and I'm really happy to be able to hear it the way that I can hear it on this. I'll tell you a little fun story. So I sat next to a guitarist, Tord, who played guitar in Afterglow, and I was telling him about, you know, the almost impossibility of getting hold of Afterglow's music records. It's sort of very expensive, and there aren't many of them around. And I told him about this record, Hinterland, that I had on CD, and he'd heard of it. He said, yeah, I listened to that. He said, and I listened to it, and I thought, I don't remember making that. That was his way of commenting, like they were making music that sounded very much like Afterglow, to the point that he even started to second guess, like, did I make this or did I not? Obviously he didn't, but it was a funny little thing that he said there. So the next album they released, which is also newly acquired now on vinyl, is this, Afterglow. I bought this at a time, it arrived to me on CD just at the point where I was moving from Sweden to move to California for a few years. And so my family had left, gone over to California, and I was left to sort of pack up the house, put all our stuff into storage, so that we could rent out our house while we was away in America. And so I had it on CD, and there was a lot of driving about with my car, you know, taking stuff to the dump, taking stuff to where we were storing it and that sort of thing. And I was listening to this album in the car at that time. You know, sadly, as CDs sometimes, you know, when you have them in a car, the CD got a bit messed up, so I still have it, but it skips here and there, which is never very fun, is it? Again, I'm really overjoyed to have this on vinyl now. It sounds just as beautiful as the last one, really, really quiet. This was an album that I felt a little bit less familiar with, but listening to it now, I can honestly say I'm not that unfamiliar with it. It's just I hadn't listened to it for a long time. It's a lovely record. I'm looking at this, just thinking, honestly, Wobbler, you could have done a little bit better with your typography there. I'll overlook that. So this is, I say it's a mini album. I don't know if it's a mini album, it's just a very short one. It's got 5 tracks on it. One of them's only 55 seconds long. But it has got a 15-minute long track and a 13-minute long track. So it's just, I think it clocks in at around about half an hour or so, more or less. So that's Afterglow. Really happy to have that. Last in this newly acquired series of Wobbler records is this album. I loved it when this came out. Again, one that I spent many hours walking in the sort of agricultural countryside where I lived in Sweden, listening to this on my headphones. This was the first album that they released with a new vocalist. I can't remember what the vocalist's name is. I think it's this guy here in the middle. I'll write it here what he's called. And he brought with him a very sort of John Anderson sounding kind of vibe to his vocals. And so when this came out, it really felt like they were sort of remaking Yes, and it really sounded like it. In hindsight, I see now it's not what they were doing. It's just this new vocalist, and together with their sound, it sounds a bit like that. But it's not. So if you're not familiar with the way Wobbler do things, they're very sort of dedicated to sort of authentic sounding music. I think they sort of record it in a very much analog way. They have a lot of analog keyboards and instruments that they use, sort of original synthesizers or organs that you sort of can remember people playing in the 70s, 60s and 70s. And it's very much their sort of attitude is that they're very, I'd say analog is just what they do, and they do it beautifully. So yeah, when this came out, it sort of skyrocketed them to a different level of success. I mean, they're kind of becoming a bit more known now. So again, beautifully sounding record, really quiet, no surface noise of any kind really, and the music is just sort of right there, comes through all the correct channels. It sounds beautiful. Now, what I'm going to show you now, these aren't newly acquired, these are ones that I had, but they just sort of complete the set, I suppose, from Silence to Somewhere, This is the album that they released after they released the last one, Rights at Dawn, and yeah, there you go, another great record. Not their best, I'd say. Out of all of the ones I've got of theirs, this is one that I perhaps like the least. Not that it's a bad record, but it's just not their best. And this, of course, is their most recent release. Was that a couple of years ago it came out? And when it did, it was my favourite record of that year. So, beautiful album. If you don't know Wobbler, check them out. If you like your prog, you like classic sounding prog, this band could have, you know, come from the golden age of prog right back in the late 60s, early 70s. That's how good they are, and I rate them very highly. So, okay, I hope that was mildly interesting for everybody. Thank you very much. Check out my next video. Bye.